Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Candice and I help girls and women who have ADHD understand and manage their brain. Today we'll be talking about ADHD paralysis and how to overcome it if you experience the same thing as I do. I'll be defining what I mean by ADHD paralysis, or analysis paralysis as some call it. And I'll be talking to you about the two types of paralysis that there are, namely physical paralysis and mental paralysis, and how to overcome them. So I'll give you all my hacks, tips, tricks that I've developed and that I, put in action every time I face this. Actually, not every time. I want to say I'm not perfect, so sometimes obviously I get stuck for a long time. But this is why I'm making this video, is because I realized how much time I was wasting by being in this paralysis state. You'll see what I mean by this, but it's useful to have some tools to get out of the state and move on. So what I mean by ADHD paralysis is a state where you're stuck in front of a decision you have to make, or you're physically stuck, by which I mean you are literally unable to move and you're feeling overwhelmed and stuck on a meaningless task like scrolling on your phone. So that's the first thing I will explain, is what is physical paralysis for me and how it manifests in my life. Physical paralysis for me shows up in my life as, for example, if I'm lying on my bed with my phone in my hand, scrolling on social media, my room is a complete mess, it is dirty, I need to do laundry, everything is on the floor on my desk. So usually that's the kind of situation I will find myself in. And on top of this, I always have like an assignment that is due, or something really urgent that I need to be doing instead of scrolling. So I don't know, for example, looking for a job, which is actually my current situation, and actually inspired me to make this video because I find myself with a lot of free time, and so a lot more chances to fall into this paralysis when I'm in my room and can get very overwhelmed with things in general. When this happens, the physical paralysis, it's a very strange feeling of not being able to move, being stuck in your head, being stuck in your mind. Sometimes you're not even conscious of it until you realize that you've been on your phone for hours and you want to move, but suddenly you feel like you cannot stop what you're doing right now and move on to the next task. So it can feel very stressful, overwhelming, just like you're stuck, both physically and mentally. I'm looking at my notes because I'm talking and then forgetting what I'm saying. So yeah, the next thing I wanted to say is, why is it a problem? Well, because it takes a lot of your time. If you're like me and you have those moments when you are on your bed doing nothing, you can be actually anywhere, sitting at a desk, in a cafe, any place, and you just, it usually happens more for me when I'm at home. But it's just a time where you completely disconnect from the world and you're in your thoughts, and it becomes very toxic the longer you do it, because nothing good comes out of overthinking. And so you get into this headspace where time just flies. And sometimes you'll see those memes, if you follow accounts of ADHD memes, those memes when you're when people are like, oh, I'll start doing this at 4, and then it's 4:05 p.m. and so they're like, you know what, I'll do it at 5. And it can go on like this for hours. And usually we do this when we're in the state of physical paralysis, when we know we should be doing something else, but we have no motivation and ability, because it's not a question of motivation so much when it's ADHD. We just cannot get ourselves to move and do the thing. That is physical paralysis. So a quick note on what is paralysis, this kind of ADHD paralysis caused by, both physical and mental. Well, if you don't know anything about ADHD symptoms are caused by impairments in 4 areas of the brain, one being the prefrontal cortex, and it causes executive functioning impairments. Do take everything I say here about the science of ADHD with a grain of salt, because I'm no professional. I'm just someone really interested in ADHD who reads a lot about it. But that's a very basic understanding of ADHD, that it affects our executive functions, and that is one cause for this kind of behavior, the ADHD paralysis, whether mental or physical. And both are actually kind of linked, because when you're in physical paralysis, it's usually happening in your head and you're physically paralyzed for some reason that I don't know and that I couldn't find online, you're unable to move physically, but it's due to the fact that you're stuck in your head. And actually, I'm saying I couldn't find reasons online, but I'm sure it's directly linked to the executive functioning as well, the physical aspect of it. So anyways, that's for the scientific side of it, why it happens. So now, what is the mental paralysis that I was talking about before? And that is usually what people call analysis paralysis. Happens a lot more to ADHD people than other people, but it can obviously happen to anyone. And it's when you get in that state of overthinking a decision that you need to make, whether it's a very small and meaningless decision or a very big, meaningful decision. It can be anywhere in the spectrum. Regardless of this, ADHD people tend to spend a lot of time thinking about decisions and wondering whether they're making the right choice or not, considering all the aspects, all the information they're given, and there's usually an overwhelm of information which causes this paralysis. For me, a great example of mental paralysis is, for instance, if I go to the restaurant and I'm sitting in front of the menu, I need to pick out a dish from the menu. It becomes really stressful for me because I'm seeing all those options on the menu that I could pick. And so I start wondering which one I actually want, which one would be the healthiest, which one costs less, more. I start over evaluating all those little pieces of information, and that is what overwhelms my brain, and I am always finding myself not able to make a decision until the very last minute. And I will explain why and how you can use this to your advantage later on in the video, so stick around if you're interested. But basically, those kinds of situations when you're faced with a decision to make and you have lots of options and it becomes really stressful, can be when you're picking a movie on Netflix, but it can also be if you have two options, then it's more meaningful than picking a movie on Netflix. For example, if you have the choice between going out to see one friend and going out to see another friend, those kinds of decisions that for most people I think are quite easy to make. For someone with ADHD, it can be really painful sometimes. And so the reason why it feels like this, it feels this way, very uneasy, overwhelming and exhausting, is because we always want to make the right choice. So for someone with ADHD, it's very difficult to not make a decision based on right or wrong. We see pretty much everything in life as either black or white. And so when we make any kind of decision, even on a menu at the restaurant, we still have this notion in the back of our heads that the choice we're gonna make is gonna determine our happiness on the moment, which is really not true. And we tend to realize this when we step out of this paralysis, but when we're in it, it becomes really hard. And I usually, for example, when I try to pick a dish, I switch from one to the other, I'm never sure, and in the end, I tend to wait until the last moment. And then I freak out and I pick something and then I'm good. Well, I can regret my choices, and I do a lot of the time, but that is linked to perfectionism, which is actually, I think, quite related to right or wrong, black and white vision of life. And we always want to make the perfect choice. We always want to make a choice that is gonna look good, feel good, really overall perfect. And it sounds weird to say like we want to make the perfect choice when we're at a restaurant and to eat, but it's really this unconscious perfectionism that leads our choices, and that's why we need to see it for what it is and then try to step aside from this perfectionism if we want to make easy choices on things that don't really matter in the end. Again, I'm looking at my notes, but so how does it affect us? Similarly to physical paralysis, it makes us lose a lot of time and energy. I usually feel really exhausted when I'm faced with a lot of choices, and this happens every single day, obviously, because you always need to pick between two options or three or four, whether you want to go to a restaurant, whether you want to pick a Netflix movie. That's like the two classical examples I have, but there are so many more. And every day you're faced with them and you need to choose quickly, because most of the situations you're faced with are not that important in the end. They don't really define your future or your happiness. So that's why it's quite debilitating to have always this mental chatter in your mind that prevents you from choosing quickly and efficiently when you're faced with many options. Now, the interesting part is what you can do about it. There's a lot of things you can do, and I started trying different things to see how I could get out of this state, especially when I'm in a physical state of paralysis. So one thing I like to do, and actually when I remember it, I do it and it works 100% of the time. So it's a technique introduced to the world, I would say, by Mel Robbins, and it's called the 5-second rule. So first of all, Mel Robbins, I talked about her. She's a motivational speaker, American woman. She has ADHD. She never really mentions it, except in one video that is the video that led me to get diagnosed myself. So the book that she wrote is called the 5-second rule, and it's called that way because she explains a principle, a very easy, applicable for anyone principle, that is counting backwards from 5 to 1 and then do the thing you want to do. And she mentioned that she was usually stuck in the morning. She couldn't get up. She didn't want to get out of bed. And I think we all, whether we have ADHD or not, face this struggle in the morning when we wake up and we just want to stay under the covers. And I used it so many times in the morning when I wanted to get up and I was feeling not lazy, but I mean I would say stuck. I would use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, and magically it would work. I cannot explain the psychology behind it. I think she explains it very well in her book, or at least she says it's backed up by science, but somehow it works super well for me. And whenever I'm in this kind of paralysis state, when I can't move, I want to do something, I don't know what to start doing, I need to just get up and do something, I usually count backwards from 5 to 1, and then I get up and I do something, whether it's exercise, jumping jacks, or anything. And so that's actually my second point. The good thing you can do when you're in this state and you finally get out of it by using the 5-second rule is to just go exercise. Just move your body. If you're in this state, it's probably because you lack the neurotransmitters that your brain needs to actually, pay attention and do a task. And I made a whole video about this that I will link somewhere up there about how exercise can benefit your brain. But exercise is a huge help when you're in this kind of vegetative, lethargic state. So that is my second advice. And then the third one would be to call a friend or someone from your family, someone you're close to, because I know that when we're in that physical state of paralysis, we're usually on our phones or tablet or computer. It's just one click away to call a friend or a family member, and it can often get you out of this zone because they will distract you, make you think of something else, and without even thinking about it, you'll just get up and start doing something. So it can be a very good help if you're stuck on your phone. And so now, what can you do about the mental paralysis? So for the small decision, the one thing I do, people don't necessarily understand why I do it, but I do it because I can't make decisions. So for me, it's very clear, so I don't feel bad about it. But this is something you can do if you have the same struggle as me, is you use those kinds of kids' nursery rhymes that we used to do when we were small to single out, someone in a team or an element of a range of options. I'm explaining it really badly, but what I mean is tap on the items that are in front of you and then you eliminate them one by one. I narrowed down my choices to 4 or 5 things. Could be books, movies, and then I'll just go like and it usually works. Well, at least I let it work, because either it makes me notice that there is one choice that I'm really drawn to, but I wasn't aware of it because I was overthinking too many things, or it just makes me pick one in a randomized manner, and so then I have my choice done for me. The second thing I talked about previously in the video is using time pressure to your advantage. We ADHD people tend to be really good under pressure, and we can make split-second decisions when we're put under pressure. And so using time as a way to make a decision quickly will be very helpful in those moments. For example, again, when you're at the restaurant, that is my go-to example because that is the one I struggle with the most. And usually when I need to pick a dish, I will simply wait until the waitress I won't do it on purpose, because if I know what I want, sometimes obviously like I know I want this, I'll take this, but most of the time I'm hesitating and I don't know what to pick. I'll just wait for the waiter to come, and then when they ask me, like they come to me, they ask everyone at the table, then they're like, what do you want? And then I will say the first thing that pops up in my mind, and it will usually be the thing that I want the most. Maybe not the most reasonable, but the thing that I truly want from my heart. So it works quite well. So that's one thing, the time pressure you can use to your advantage all the time. And the second thing that you can do is define if a decision is high value or low value, if it's meaningful or meaningless to your life overall. What I mean by this is, for example, picking the Netflix movie you're gonna watch at night, or a dish at the restaurant, or a wine, or anything that is such a small, meaningless decision. You shouldn't spend a lot of time on it. And so what you can do is just set yourself a time limit. Basically, you say, okay, I have 5 minutes now to choose a movie. You see a few ones that interest you, you're like, okay, maybe that one, maybe that one. When you get to the end, you just make your choice and you watch that movie and you don't question it anymore. Because the thing is, it's not gonna matter in the end what you watch on Netflix one night. And I don't know where I saw this. I saw this, I guess, like in a blog post or somewhere. They were saying it's crazy how much time people take to pick a movie, and sometimes they take even more time to pick the movie than to actually watch it. Anyways, I think it's really interesting sociological example. But in terms of analysis paralysis, just set yourself a limit and then go with the last choice or the first. Just do it. So my advice for difficult situations is basically get out of your head. Put everything on paper. I like doing mind maps. It makes me visualize what I have in mind, because I usually get really lost in my thoughts and just overwhelmed with all the information that's to be taken into account. So if I do mind maps, I can see clearly, I can link things, I can color code, and I see very well where I'm going. And the second thing would be to talk about it to someone. Again, it's really useful to just talk it out, get it out of your head. Talk to a friend, talk to a family member, someone who can help you figure it out. And ultimately, just give yourself a deadline again for making this decision. If it's an important decision, or even if it's a decision about going to see one friend or the other, because that can seem ridiculous, but sometimes, a lot of the time it happens to me, where I spend a lot of time, trying to figure out what should I do. Should I go see this friend? Should I go do this? What's the right choice, basically? And sometimes I just have to tell myself, okay, it doesn't really matter if you do one thing or the other, so just pick a time and then choose and stick to it. That's the most important thing. And I guess that links to my final advice, which is be okay with the decision you make. In the end, there's no perfect decision, and we just need to be okay with the fact that the decisions we take, the decisions we make, are good because we chose them. And that's very important for anyone who has ADHD and who is a perfectionist. A lot of ADHD people are perfectionists, so I think it applies to a lot of you. And that is, I think, the best advice I can give you is that most of the time it doesn't even matter. So just pick something, stick to it, and your life will be so much easier if you just make those small decisions quicker, faster, and in a way where you're confident with your choices. That's it for this video, guys. I've been filming this outro for literally 55 times now, and I've decided that I don't want it to be perfect anymore. I'll just go with what I make right now. So I'm sorry with the weird light situation. I know it's been really harsh on my face. It's the first time I film in a dark setting. So thank you for bearing with me until now. If you like the video, then please click on the like button below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content like this. That would really help me grow on YouTube and share my advice with many more people. So thank you so much again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!